Morning, everybody. I'll call to order the Board of County Commissioners meeting for January 28th. We have a pretty full agenda today with an executive session and a 3:30 time certain. I just want to make sure everybody is aware that Commissioner Sorensen is out at the United Front conference in DC, and he will be calling in later this afternoon as part of our meeting. So he is excused for the earlier portion of our meeting. I have a bit of a cold that I'm trying to get over, so please excuse me if I have any coughing or sound a little funny. So we'll proceed to the adjustments to the agenda. Does anybody have any adjustments to the agenda?
I don't have the agenda in front of me. I'd like to pull item 5A, 2, and 3.
5A, 2, and 3. Okay. Any other adjustments to the agenda? All right. We will proceed to public comment. I have 5 people signed up.
Madam Chair, Sir Chair.
Yes.
Is it all right if we just make a comment about Commissioner Sorensen?
I did do that.
I'm sorry, I missed
Yes. I made sure to do that.
it. Thank you.
Your voice isn't strong enough.
My voice is a little, I'll try to keep this thing a little closer today. And I normally wouldn't have anything in my mouth, but I do have a cough drop. So first up, we have Mr. McCarthy. Please come on up. Give your name and your district that you're from, and we'll give you 3 minutes. And right after that is Mr. Russell.
I'll try to. My name is Robert McCarthy. I live at 24214 Subtle Road outside of Veneta. I'm one of the operators of Elfinwood Camp, one of the approximately 12 camps that provide camping opportunities for the many thousands of public attending the Oregon Country Fair. The forming of these camps beginning over 30 years ago was to begin to alleviate the annual disruptive pandemonium in our neighborhood. Yes, we live there. And provide a safe camping situation for the families attending the fair. Some problems had persisted as a result of the volume of traffic to the fair and after-hours noise and revelry of the fair family and public attendees. Last year, concerted effort by the campground operators did much to minimize and alleviate these problems. Comes now, new onerous and unjustified fees, increases, and regulations foisted upon the camp operators. We have been meeting, as we do. We wrote the following letter to be submitted to the appropriate county administrators and to be read now to you, their bosses. Commissioners, we are the operators of the off-site campgrounds during the Oregon Country Fair and would like to inform you that we have some serious concerns. One of our concerns is that the radical changing of our original licensing agreement. Another is the recent more than tripling of the environmental fees now being requested of us. Finally, during our pre-fair 2019 meeting with land management, there was an agreement to meet post-fair on July 27th to debrief on the observations made by county officials resulting from their visiting our campground operations during the fair. Most all campground owners were at the scheduled post-fair meeting. However, no Lane County officials attended. We request to schedule a meeting by February 20th of this year and would also request you to confirm by February 10th with a date, place, and time. Thank you, Robert McCarthy, and 8 other signers.
Thank you. Mr. Russell. And after that, Karen Ramos. Ramos? Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. If you could state your full name and your district, that would be.
Again?
If you could state your full name and district before you begin.
Shit. Where you live?
Your full name and the district.
Robert Russell. I'm out in Marcola. I have a temporary campground in the Mohawk Valley on a ranch north of Shotgun Creek. You may remember me from a while back. This campground is operated in conjunction with a music festival I occasionally produce in July. I was notified last year that I needed to procure permits from both the Environmental Health Department and from the Land Use Department. I was also notified that the fee for the Health Department permit was increasing from under $300 to over $650 a year. Both of these requirements are outrageous. In an investigation over the last several months, I found that other owners of, quotes, temporary campgrounds here in Lane County have also been surprised by these outrageous fee increases, as well as imposition of many burdensome regulations. I and others would like to meet with personnel from both of these departments to discuss these issues. For planning purposes, I request these meetings be held soon, before the middle of February. He said 20th of February, that'd be fine. The cooperation of all of the temporary campground owners with Lane County officials will produce the best and fairest results. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Ramus. Ramus, excuse me.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Commissioner Farr. Thank you so much for coming over to visit me at my show this weekend twice. I know it's an important issue. This parcel of land would be like the Central Park in New York. To have an opportunity to keep it intact, we consider it the fairgrounds, the jewel of the county. We always have historically. For our newer commissioners, you haven't seen the way we've operated over the last 30 and 40 years that my company's been a tenant at your fairgrounds. We've always had public process. We've had the neighborhood groups, people meeting at the fairgrounds when we talked about the ice arena closing. We had public meetings where all stakeholders were involved in a thorough conversation, an opportunity to exchange dialogue, not talk at commissioners in a public setting like this 1 week before a vote. I'm pretty in the loop. I had no idea we were talking about a permanent structure on that 0.74 acres on the fairgrounds. Anyone with a heart in this community knows the need for this housing. I just think if you knew about the funding availability last summer and the location was going to be identified, the public process that we are accustomed to did not happen. It's unfortunate. It's not transparent. I think if you're going to move forward with the 0.7 acres, what you're doing is taking a jewel, a 300-carat diamond, and chipping it into some dust. And we know, as citizens, if the public process isn't followed and backroom deals are made, even if they're well-intended, it doesn't include the stakeholders, and soon all we'll have is a half-carat diamond, because the need is endless. We know that. It doesn't stop there. So if you're moving forward because of the deadlines for your funding, I, as a 40-year client, our event's been a 40-year client of your facility, 3 weeks out of the year. We could rally troops. We could bring people in to give you feedback if given time. But you can't do it when people work their day jobs. They can't make it to these meetings. These roofers, these wedding planners, they've got a schedule to keep. They can't just go out of their office and come here with short notice. I just would really encourage you, if you're going to move forward with the funding of the 22 bed or room housing project, that you, A, look for the best possible location close to services. Down 13th seems closer to a school and a grocery store to me, but because of your deadline and the process that you followed, identifying property last summer without giving us a chance to testify, and now you have this deadline for $9 million, and maybe I'm operating on misnomers, but that's the data I've collected since Thursday. I think a public commitment to keeping the rest of the property intact until you hold the stakeholder meetings is only fair. That's the way we operated when they talked about closing the ice arena. That's the way we operated with the commissioners when you talked about, not you, but the board had discussions about moving the fairgrounds. There was a complete public process. And someday that might be a stadium, someday it may be housing. We don't know. But the greater purpose of the big parcel intact, given that it was paid, those lands were bought by fairgrounds funds, I think the stakeholders' voice is really important. And, those facts need to come out. Who bought that property? My understanding from Steve McCullough, the old director, is it was fair receipts.
Thank you.
Revenue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Next is Charmaine, and I am not sure the last name, so please feel free, come on up and say your full name in your district.
My name's Charmaine Ragg, and Pat Farr is my commissioner. I totally agree with the last speaker and with Commissioner Bozievich viewpoint that was in the paper. And if you'll note, there was also a letter to the editor the same day pointing out the same thing. The fairgrounds belong to, because they're county fairgrounds, they belong to every single person in the county. And to me, that means they should not, any part of it, be utilized for a special interest. And that's what this would be. I don't think it should be chipped away at all. There are other places to find housing, and in the future, something else that includes the whole county may be needed for that area, including, as was pointed out, about vendors to the fair. So the bottom line is, I don't even see how you could do that. Take something that's not yours but belongs to the whole county and then turn that over to special interests because now you feel in a bind over this grant money. Well, if you do, pick some other place, that Naval Reserve or some other place to get in under your date that you have to have this in by. But I do not think the fairgrounds should even be considered because it's all of ours and we haven't had a say in that. I think it should be off the table and off the table today so we can quit worrying about it. I don't want any special interest on what is public property. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Piccioni.
Hi, David Piccioni, Eugene, Oregon. Yeah, I see this. Yes, I was here for city council yesterday, and I don't remember which councilor said this or what the intent was, but somebody commented that the population of Eugene is growing, and the way they said it didn't really sound like an alarm or anything. It sounded like, oh, okay, well, we're going to have more money, more businesses, blah, blah. But I don't think that growing the population is anything we should want. I think that we should really take this problem really seriously because population grows about 1 million. Our population now is 8 billion people on this planet, and the rate of growth is 1%. 1% doesn't seem too much, but it's actually 80 million people every year, and where are they going to go? So there's going to be problems with people trying to find a good place where they can get drinkable water, where they can get a little bit of a place where they can grow their food and stuff like that. And so I'm not really here for to make any comment regarding this fairground, but what I am going to say is if you use that place for people, in 10 years you're going to need more room because it's always growing, grow. At one point in history, it was important because a lot of people died from infant mortality rates. But now we have the opposite problem. We're not trying to make sure that our genes continue on. We're trying to fit into this world, and we should be more conscientious and share this planet in a way that doesn't infringe on other people. I don't think having more than 2 children is a good thing. I don't, and the least the better. Thank you. Oh, and I think we should be protecting the Planned Parenthoods, like with really serious charges to people who attack the doctors. And we should give them funding, free contraceptives, free condoms, the pill, everything, completely free. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment section, and so we'll move on to Commissioner's response or remonstrance. Any comments? Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. So, Mr. McCarthy, I'd just like to say thank you for coming in. I believe that your fee increases were something that we were made aware of for bed and breakfasts, but we weren't aware of the campground increases. So I plan on looking into that, because I know we did go back and look at the bed and breakfast fee increases, because they were kind of out of line with some of the other ones that we did recently. So I promise you I'll look into that. But I want to take a moment to thank you and the other campground owners. The work you did last year to resolve some of the issues with neighbors, and the work that you did also with the Country Fair folks and the Country Fair Board was phenomenal. And the decrease in complaints from neighbors and all that was noticeable. I basically got one or two. And after years of being afraid to open my email during Fair Week, so you guys have done a great job in cooperation with your neighbors. You're doing good work. You're providing a great service out there. People remember the days when people were illegally camping and trespassing on people's properties, trying to attend the fair all weekend. And you guys are doing a good job. Your camp in particular is, one of the most well-run camps out there. And I just wanted to thank you for that effort that you guys made last year. I've expressed that in a post-fair meeting with some of the stakeholders, but I may not have gotten out to all the camp owners. I just wanted to take this moment to say I really appreciate the effort that you all have made in trying to be good neighbors, and the work that's been done out there to resolve traffic issues, and our Walk Like a Duck effort to protect pedestrians, and other things we're doing out there has just really been a great team effort, and I just want to appreciate that.
Commissioner Bray.
No, go ahead, Joe. First, I would like to ditto Commissioner Bozovich's remarks. I have a great deal of respect for him, but frankly, I don't believe he was ever afraid to open his emails. So that's point one. And I look forward to that meeting. I hope that can occur by February 20th as requested, and look into the fee situation. I would like to share with, is it Ms. Ramos? That speaking for myself, I may be a new commissioner, but I'm an old man. And I've lived with the fair for 30 years. So just FYI, have had booths at the home show, have a father-in-law who had a booth for well over 2 decades at the Piccadilly, have had many friends that have had kids that were derby players, have a son that used some of the temporary basketball courts in there, so intimately involved with that. And I would like to share with you that I don't like the process either, but it's not the Board of Commissioners. We are responding. We learned about this when, October-ish? Something like that. And let me just say my main criticism about the process, I know we'll deal with the subject later. From my perspective, we have politicians in Salem that want to demonstrate what they're doing for homeless and affordable housing, and created resources from our tax money, and then established a deadline. And that deadline was so fast that the good intent, which I think everybody applauds, sometimes creates divisiveness in terms of process, which we don't need. What we need is to come together and find solutions that work for a variety of the problems that we're facing in a nonpartisan, divisive way. So I think the process created some of the divisiveness we're dealing with, and I think it's our duty as public servants to deal with it, and we will over the next week. But I just wanted to share with you that you are not the only ones that have not appreciated the process by which this opportunity has made itself available to the county. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bob. You know, this agenda item is called, let's see, read it exactly, Commissioner responds to public comments and/or other issues and remonstrances. So I have a couple of other issues and then response. The first one I'd like to applaud Mackenzie Willamette for opening the midwifery center. They're already serving a large number of women and families who choose alternative methods of birth. After PeaceHealth chose to close theirs down, Mackenzie Willamette stepped in and filled the needs, hiring many of the professionals who were previously involved at the other hospital's location. They've also announced that they're going to be expanding the services as the need arises and as money becomes available. They've also explained how little, in the grand scheme of things, it cost them to do it. Bravo, Mackenzie Willamette, and bravo to the work that went into that, to the folks who testified here, and maintaining that alternate means of childbirth for families and for women. The second is I'd like to talk about Carry It Forward. Ms. Mokrahysky, not long ago, we signed a contract with Carry It Forward to operate on a piece of county property, the former Flying Scot Drive-In, which also housed Camp 99 for a period of time. Carry It Forward's moved in there, and with the great results. Far too great for me to sum up in a sentence or two, but I'm going to sum it up in a sentence or two as much as I can. This is from Occupy Medical, a response to what Carry It Forward is doing. Carry It Forward takes soiled and otherwise discarded clothing and bedding from campsites, cleans it, rejuvenates it, and returns it as much as possible to the original owner. Sometimes it goes into a bank and is distributed to people other than the original owner. This message from Sioux Sierra Loop: keeping people in dry socks is only one of the many services that Carry It Forward performs. Underline, one of the many services. Occupy Medical and Carry It Forward cooperate on numerous services projects throughout the week. They bring in dry socks. They say that the mission integrates into their healthcare policy perfectly. Before Carry It Forward, we treated trench foot regularly. Since their inception, the cases of trench foot in our clinic have dropped from weekly to 0. Let's take that in context with all the other things that Carry It Forward is doing for the small amount that we have invested in the program. Congratulations on money, county money well spent. They're moving forward. I also have a letter that I'll distribute to all members of the board as to what has happened out there already. They've already provided emergency services to 634 unhoused people in Eugene and Springfield from our tiny little investment. It's ballooning out. The third thing is a meeting that I've been attending, a small group regarding the repurposing of the Serbu, one of the two pods, either the easternmost or the westernmost pod. The debate continues as to which pod we're going to use. That program is going to be carried out in conjunction with Lane ASD, because it is a strongly educational facility, and it's also going to be carried out in conjunction with not Shelter Care, but Looking Glass and with Whitebird. The reception center for that is going to cost $150,000. The money we're invested in that, Mr. Mokrahysky, is once again tremendous return on the investment. Far more to say than a few words, far more to talk about than a few words can sum up. And Karen, I spent two really pleasant meetings out there with you, and pleasant in part because of what was going on in the surrounding buildings, setting up for the home show. I did so many home shows through the years, and you've been there as long as to remember when Jerry's did the home show in the old animal barns. But I enjoyed talking with you, enjoyed responding to the letter that you wrote to us all early on Friday morning. And the testimony that you provided today, I'll respond to a little bit more at 3 o'clock, but your testimony corresponds pretty closely to what you and I discussed. And I'll sum that up, that the public process, as Commissioner Burney has pointed out, was hasty. There were reasons for it. There are conditions that caused that to happen. No excuses, just conditions. And the repurposing of any land at the fairground beyond the 0.74 acres that we're looking at right now, there has to be a thorough public process. It involves people who really have an vested interest in use of the fairgrounds. So thank you for being here this morning. And stay tuned at 3 o'clock because I'll say more than a sentence or two at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody that have come to talk. I also very much appreciate the folks that came out to talk about the fairgrounds. It's a big subject, and we've had a pretty big talk about it the last meeting, but I know, given the length of time that we discussed it, it begs the question of having more discussion over many different aspects of it. I also wanted to comment on one other item. I was able to attend the Martin Luther King Jr. March this year, as I've done for many years. And this year they were celebrating, in light of the centennial of 100 years of the passage of the 19th Amendment, women who have marched along with them for civil rights. And there were 2 individuals from the county that were recognized and given awards, and that was Mo Young and Laura Vinson. And I just wanted to congratulate them on that honor. They do a lot of wonderful work on equity and civil rights within our community, and we're very proud to have them work for the county. Any other response or remonstrance? Okay. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar except for item A, 2, and 3?
Yes, Chair, I move acceptance of consent calendar excluding item 5A, 2, and 3.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Thank you.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Approval moved by Burney, second by Farr. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes with Sorensen excused. All right, we'll move on to items 5A, 2, and 3 that were pulled from the calendar. We'll start, Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. So I asked to pull these 2 items because I have spoken with Chair Buck. I wasn't made aware of her person she wished to appoint until I saw the agenda for this week, and I contacted her immediately over my concerns. I'd like to move to table items 5A, 2, and 3, which includes my appointment, until the March 10th board meeting.
Is there a second?
If I may just ask a clarification, is there a particular reason that March 10th is the date you select?
That gives enough time for Chair Buck to do another search for a Budget Committee appointee. And it's prior to when we actually start the budget process.
I'll second that and for discussion. Thank you.
Okay, got a motion on the floor, and this is for both Order 2, item 5A, 2, and 3. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. You know, the selection by individual commissioners of an appointee to Parks Advisory, to Roads Committee, whatever it may be, budget in this case, really is more of a personal issue. And I've always viewed that as a personal issue. And I've made my selections through the years, and really have I sought input from my fellow commissioners, because it's my choice. And I hold that dear, that it is our individual and personal choice. So that being said, I'd like to hear why, in this case, it may be worthy of a discussion beyond the personal choice of the commissioner involved.
Commissioner Bozievich?
Thank you. So I would agree and normally respect that, with the exception of choice should not be made that flies in the face of a fellow commissioner. I would no more choose to appoint former Commissioner Handy to the Budget Committee and ask you to vote in favor of it than having somebody recommend somebody that ran a campaign against me that included innuendo and inaccuracies about my relationships with former Administrator Leanne Richardson, that recently wrote in the Eugene Weekly in reference to me, "It's not the first time this former Tea Party activist commissioner has fanned the flames of divisiveness. He's on record inciting fears such as they're coming to take your guns. He relentlessly trashes government and the dedicated public servants we elect and hire to run it. He's the architect of a 2010 gerrymander to disenfranchise Democrat voters on what is supposed to be a nonpartisan board." Now, have you heard me trash government employees here? There's 375,000 people living in Lane County. I made Chair Buck aware of my objections to this particular person and asked her to withdraw her nomination, and I was willing to hold mine at the same time. I'm asking to have this tabled to give her an opportunity to look again. This person is preparing to run against me again. And I feel that this appointment is basically to give resume material to that person. And if it's made, I will consider Chair Buck to have decided that she is going to spend her time being political and trying to operate to remove me from office. And I have to deal with my relationship from now on with that in mind if we move forward with this appointment. That's why, for the good of the board relationships, I'm asking to have this tabled and for Chair Buck to go out and search for somebody else to appoint.
Would you like? I'll let you go and then I can respond. Ms. Burney.
I would rather have you respond. My only point was going to be, here we are again, a bunch of men speaking for a woman.
I appreciate that.
I would like to know how you feel about the subject.
Thank you. You know, I had an open period of time in which people could apply for this appointment. And I was able to look through a couple of resumes. And, we're talking about my recommendation to the board for Don Leslie to be on the Budget Committee. We have a need for smart, intelligent, capable women on our Budget Committee. And for that matter, before I even got here, it was 10 men. We need diversity on our board with smart people. And Dawn is one of those. And it is a personal choice. I may not choose the same people that each one of you have chosen, but I respect your choice to pick who you've chosen. I understand she ran against Commissioner Bozovich. That was 6 years ago. And I'm hoping that those personal differences can be set aside and we can act in a professional manner for the good of the county. If somebody chooses to run again, nobody has a crystal ball. It may or may not happen. Who knows? It's 3 years from now. And in the meantime, we need to get some good work done with people that are capable. And I would ask my fellow commissioners, when they're seeking appointments for their members on different boards, to think about some equity and representing people throughout the county so that we have some diversity on our board as well. Commissioner Burney.
On the one hand, I can absolutely, totally appreciate Commissioner Bozovich's sensitivity to this particular individual. On the other hand, it does feel that it's Commissioner Buck's appointment, as Commissioner Farr had said. I don't think I'm in a position. I, by the way, have yet to make an appointment to the Budget Committee. I inherited my predecessor's appointment, and he may not have been my choice. He probably would not have been my choice, and yet we're working well together, and I'm enjoying that. And I look forward to being able to make an appointment. My concern is, I think this is a slippery slope if we start infusing a variety of impositions on a choice that is an individual commissioner's choice. And it's not without appreciation for the sensitivity here, but I just don't see myself telling Commissioner Farr or Commissioner Buck who they can appoint and who they can't appoint to various committees. That's my position on this. I would hate to set that precedent, although if it ever would be set, I would understand it would be on this one. But I would hate to go there personally, unless I can be convinced otherwise. I see this as your choice.
Commissioner Bozovich.
I want to be clear. I'm not intending to tell Commissioner Buck. I've made her aware of my sensitivity about this particular appointment. I've asked her to make a choice. And, you know, my first budget we passed here, I worked with Rose Wieldy, an intelligent woman, on resolving how we could fund the Egan Warming Center. You know, and also some of our prosecutors, and came to a motion that was approved unanimously to do so. You know, I have no objection, you know, to appointing women and look forward to appointing women. This is about one particular person that as recently as 2 months ago has written some pretty nasty things about me. And I made Chair Buck aware of that as soon as I found out she was considering appointing her, and I'm just asking her, in her judgment, to understand how this makes me feel like she's acting. And I've made her aware of that, and if she wishes to move forward with that, I've told her, you know, in very clear terms, how I will treat that in our relationship moving forward. That's all I'm doing. I'm asking her to make a choice. I'm not intending to tell, and what I'm hoping the motion to table will do will enable her to go out and make another search. And I'm more than happy to, you know, vote yes on anyone other than this particular person she's brought forward.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And that's a discussion that I'd hope to have by seconding the motion that was made. Now, I'm going to go historically a little bit. When I became a county commissioner, I also inherited a budget committee member from a previous commissioner who was Rob Handy, the aforementioned, and that was Rose Wieldy, the aforementioned. And I asked Ms. Wieldy if she wanted to continue as a budget committee member, and at the time, because of a family situation, which most of us are aware of, Rose did not have the time to do it and did not continue as a budget committee member at that point in time. And I think, Commissioner Berney, you continued with your committee member based on the same thing you asked, and they stayed, and you're waiting for the next cycle. I think, you know, the other thing is that regarding the political nature of the Budget Committee, I hope it's not. I hope it's not. And, you know, I hope it's a committee that really looks at the very basis of why we have that statutory committee, which is to make the best use of county funds, whether it be taxpayer funds or fees or whatever it may be. That being said, Commissioner Sorensen at one point appointed Lori Trieger as a budget committee member. Lori stayed on for a while and then left, once again, I think because of family circumstances, but Lori is now running for South Eugene Commissioner. So being a budget committee member doesn't preclude running for office. In fact, when I was on the Eugene City Council, I tried to make appointments from Bethel based on people who may be interested in getting in the pipeline for public service. To me, it's an important part of public service is serving on committees. So that being said, I've listened very, very closely to the commentary, and I am going to fall back on my position that when I choose a budget committee member, it's my decision. And if somebody questions my decision, I'll listen to them politely, and then I'll make my decision. And that's where I am today. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner.
I'm in the same place, so I feel that this is completely Commissioner Buck's decision whether she chooses to change her position on the basis of the input from Commissioner Bozovich or does not. Ultimately, I believe it's her decision. And I think I heard you say the same thing.
I'll just make a final comment that, the choice of my Budget Committee member was not in any way to vex any other commissioner. I just wanted somebody that I knew was capable and smart and interested in the budget and wanted to do some public service for our community. But I also am hearing that I feel like there is an ultimatum on the floor that if I choose Dawn to be on the Budget Committee, that it some way means that our relationship is broken, and that's not my intent in any way. I'm not interested in that. I am here to do business, and I'm here to keep the county moving, and I want to work with everybody. I've already told Dawn that she was my choice, and to change that appointment due to an ultimatum feels wrong. I don't think I need to make that particular choice. I also want to make it very, very clear that this is in no way intended to target anybody. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to table item 5A, 2, and 3 till March 10th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
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 Motion does not pass with Commissioner Bozovich and I and Commissioner Sorensen excused. So now we are back to the original two orders. I'll start with order number item 5A2, order 20-01-28-01, in the matter of appointing Don Leslie to the Lane County Budget Committee for District 5, East Lane, to fill an unexpired term. Is there a motion to approve this order?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Berney, seconded by Commissioner Farr. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Aye.
Motion passes with Bozovich in the nay and Sorensen excused. We'll move to item 5A3, Order 20-01-28-02, in the matter of reappointing Herb Voldman to the Lane County Budget Committee for District 1, West Lane. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Berney, seconded by Commissioner Farr. Any discussion? We'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes with Sorensen excused. Okay. We'll move to item 6, Health and Human Services. Item A, report and discussion in the matter of crisis center funding. We have with us Karen Gaffney, our Director of HNHS, and Pauline Martin, Behavioral Health Manager. And I believe we might have one more.
Yes, Chair Buck, we're expecting Captain Riley to
All right.
join us. And I'm going to be down here operating our technology, so if you give me just a moment to get this up.
I feel like I'm at the Mental Health Summit.
That will give Captain Riley a moment to settle in as well. Sorry, this is taking just a moment. There we go. Good Morning, Chair Buck, Commissioners. I am joined at the table by Pauline Martin, the county's behavioral health manager, and Captain Clint Riley, our jail commander. And I'm going to do a brief introduction. We have a slide presentation and update, and we've made sure that we'll preserve plenty of time for questions and discussion. What we brought to you today really is an interim report on our progress to date on the charge that was given to us this budget year to work with community stakeholders to develop a mental health crisis center. We gave you a brief update at the budget kickoff, and today we're prepared to go a little bit more in detail. So I want to looks like we lost one of our circles on that chart. Imagine, if you will, a third circle on the bottom that overlaps that says homelessness. Really, we wanted to.
I have it in my pocket.
Yes.
That's right. We've solved, yes, yes, indeed. And today we just wanted to anchor this discussion in that intersection that the board identified as part of your strategic plan of needing to address simultaneously our public safety issues, behavioral health issues, and homelessness, that while those are not one and the same, they are absolutely interconnected. And we know that if we're going to address any one of those, we really need to be able to address all three of those. So the context for our conversation today about mental health crisis is also grounded and running alongside of our ongoing conversation about how do we address homelessness in the community and the implementation of the TAC recommendations. So I just want to be clear from the beginning that as we do this work, we're also keeping front and center in our minds the work around addressing homelessness and where there are opportunities to really leverage those two conversations and connect that work together. So that will come up later as we move through the rest of the presentation. Oh, look, there's experiencing homelessness.
And it will happen.
Wow.
Diana must be watching. I know.
All right. Ever so briefly, I would remind you that this work is grounded in our biennial mental health and addictions plan that really called out the need to better address crisis services in our community. Our mental health summit work, which is our stakeholders from our public safety system and behavioral health system who come together monthly to look at that intersection and addressing those three key bullets there of incarceration, utilization of the state hospital, and emergency department. What we know is that there are people who are landing there who don't belong there, that their needs could better be addressed by a robust crisis system, and that in this budget, the commissioners have identified $1 million to help us bring partners to the table to address the issue.
Okay. Good morning, commissioners. I'm going to go through the next two or three slides very quickly. This is, I had mentioned when I was here for the budget kickoff, the process that we went through to identify what the gaps are. So the bulk of the work has been at the Mental Health Summit, and we identified a smaller group that has been involved in working through this process. So I want to leave a little more time to really talk about the elements of what we are going to be presenting to you as what we see as the ideal comprehensive crisis system in the county. So as far as the process, we redid a sequential intercept mapping that brought all the stakeholders together to really look at what it is that we are needing. So part of the plan identified a need for community outreach teams. The group also identified mental health crisis respite, need for rapid connection to services, and need for shared data. And we reviewed a lot of crisis programs in the area and looked at also across the country to kind of give us an idea of what other communities are doing to address the crisis issue, particularly, as Karen mentioned, those folks that are in that intersection between behavioral health, public safety, and homelessness. So identified gaps, again, we all agreed that there's a need for alternatives for law enforcement when individuals are in acute behavioral health distress. difficulty connecting services to individuals throughout the court process, need a facility for behavioral health crisis. That's a longer period of time. What we have now is Looking Glass that has about ability to do 23 hours. We identified a need to focus on services for known individuals with a mental disorder that cycle through the criminal justice and crisis systems. And we also need to address homelessness. Again, it's that intersection, and we'll keep saying that, and how we'll be coordinating with other departments that are also addressing this issue. So this is our current system, and I want to spend a little time with on this using a hypothetical individual who goes through this process. So, and then we'll go into the next slide that will highlight what we anticipate to see as the ideal crisis system. So what we have now is these systems. We have the jail, we have Whitebird or Cahoots, we have the emergency department, we have Hourglass. We do have a section that is located at Lane County Behavioral Health that does civil commitment. So those are folks who are found to be a danger to themselves or others, or unable to care for their needs, and who are then either taken to the hospital under a civil commitment for subsequent care. We also have another section that looks at the forensic populations. Those are people who are interfacing with the criminal justice system. What we did find out was that a lot of these systems seem to work in isolation. There's not a whole lot of coordinated services or coordinated care, or if there is, it's not streamlined. So a hypothetical client, say Simon, is picked up by the police trespassing in a neighborhood, and in the process of conversing with Simon, it becomes very clear that they have a mental illness. They believe the place that they are trespassing is their home, and they believe the people to be imposters, and they want them out. So they're talking with the police, and what ends up happens is either they are taken to the ED, depending on the nature of their acute symptoms, or they may end up in the jail. So what we noticed, or what we have seen, is usually if they end up at the jail, there is not a lot of coordinated mental health services at the jail. So we see a lot of people who continue to deteriorate because their mental health systems are not well addressed. What we also are seeing is the more people cycle through repeated episodes of psychosis, they never go back to their baseline. So this repeated cycle makes their symptoms worse, to where they will never return to their original baseline if they were functioning members of the society. They get to be more and more dependent in our systems. So we want to avoid as much as possible from sending people into systems that don't really address the needs. So Simon goes to the jail, and they end up deteriorating, and most often they will end up at the state hospital. If they end up at the ED, usually it's for a very short period of time. They may get connected with services. Oftentimes, they may agree to services and they're discharged, and there's no follow-up to services. So they're completely disengaged, and these are the people that we're seeing continually cycling in our system. So what we are hoping to get is that really coordinated care that moves people to the various systems that we're going to be identifying in the next slide, where whatever the need is addressed timely and is coordinated, and where people are then moved into the next level of care that they need. So they are never disengaged, if they're wanting services, that they start coordinated effort to get them the services that they need. So with that, we are looking at all the other entities that are involved in caring for the individuals to make sure that there are entities and areas that people can be referred to. So we'll go to the next slide. So this is what we envision as the crisis system. So at the center, like I said before, we did identify that we do need a crisis center. And we see these as being an integral part of the system where a lot of these services could be triaged. So we go back to Simon, who gets picked up. And for law enforcement now, they have a place that they can take this person who they can tell this is a person who is experiencing some behavioral health crisis. They will take them to this center, and what we are envisioning is that there are staff members who are trained to figure out through assessments where or what services this person needs. So the center will have more time where stabilization can happen, and depending on where the person is, can then be referred to these other services. So we'll have, they could go to Hourglass if they're just needing a shorter period of time, or they could be referred to, you probably have heard Steve Manila talk about the, what's that center? Navigation Center. Yeah, the Navigation Center. We're also talking about, increasing shelter beds. So we are having those many other resources where we can triage these people so they're not going back to situations that brought them initially to the crisis center. So the elements of this crisis center are what we identified as the crisis center itself, which will be 24-hour, thought process, where it is also 24-hour that, we also have a walk-in section where people can come in. They may come in major crisis or some sort of crisis where then they can be divided to other facilities or other services. We are looking at a similar program in Clackamas County where they have one side of where they have two doors. So there's the walk-in door, and then they have the section that law enforcement brings people in more acute crisis, so that the two are not mixing. So people can self-refer, or they can brought in by law enforcement through a different door. So, so the four elements of these crisis system include the crisis center itself. We also have the geodiversion that I'll have the captain talk about in a minute. And then we also identified a need for outreach teams. So those are people who are going to meet people where they're at. We identified a need to engage, to build rapport. So when they're coming to the crisis system, they're coming to systems that they've already been talked to about or engaged by the outreach team. So they know a little bit about what those services are. They're not complete strangers to the staff that are working at the center, that they know them from the outreach work that they are doing. And Steve Manila's division is also working on outreach teams. So what we would like to do is kind of look at how we can collaborate with those divisions to see whether we can use the same outreach teams or add on to the outreach team. So if they have a group that's doing that, what do we need to make it comprehensive? What we don't want to do is duplicate work. We want to work collaboratively to identify all these gaps together and how we can address those. And the last element of the crisis system is stabilization. You probably remember that we had engaged Peace Health with identifying or running a 5-bed facility, a respite. So that's kind of what we are looking to add in our system as well. So a stabilization, or adding stabilization beds where the less acute, so the crisis center will be more the acute, symptoms, but once they've passed that psychotic, the psychotic crisis, that they can be in more stabilized and kind of a quiet place where they can stabilize before they move back to their original housing. Okay. So those are the 4 elements of what we see as the crisis system. So I talked about the crisis center. So the only thing I would add here is that we are looking to add the peer-delivered services into this program, realizing how crucial peers are in the work that we do. They are able to engage better in a way that a lot of us as professionals are not able to, just because of their lived experience. So we want to use peer-delivered services as much as possible. The other thing that we were thinking about is having this center as close to downtown as possible. That is, it will be a resource that will be both available to Eugene and Springfield, close to public transportation, and we want to make sure that there are prescriber services at the center. So we'll have ideally would like to have a psychiatrist or a psych nurse practitioner. And I will have Captain talk about the jail diversion. This is modeled after the Yellow Line project that originated in Wisconsin, and Captain will talk to us about that.
Good morning. I'm battling the same cough that Commissioner Buck's battling, so I got a cough drop in, so bear with me. One of the gaps that we see when folks come to jail is they're arrested and they're brought to jail, and we hold them until they get to court. Oftentimes, there's no intervention from anybody before they get to court. So a Yellow Line project would essentially bring mental health professionals, somebody to the table as soon as someone came to jail to assess what their needs are, and then work with the courts to develop a plan if they were to be released from jail. Where do they go to prevent them from coming back to jail? Which this kind of corresponds directly with the outreach team as well. We see a lot of people that come to jail that just flat don't engage in services. Even if services are offered to them, oftentimes substance abuse or mental health issues are the overlying problem that keeps them coming back to jail. So the Yellow Line project would get someone in the jail to be able to see somebody, to maneuver the courts, to put a release plan together that's hopefully going to get them on a transition of success, released from jail, and then some sort of resources to help them as they continue with their court case. They don't need to do it in jail. Right now, we're seeing too many people stay in jail because there's no release options for them, and the judges feel obligated for community safety to hold them in jail, which starts the deterioration process, which leads to a lot of times state hospital. So the Yellow Line project, once we got into the nuts and bolts of how it would work, we have to have, I know I would support allowing access for people to come into the jail, interview people, get a good assessment, and have them prepared for court. It's a pretty quick process. When someone gets arrested today, they have to be in court tomorrow at an arraignment and formally charged with a crime or released from jail. These become even more critical when the charges get dropped, and then we just release someone from jail. It's the same crisis, whether we're holding them or just releasing them. But we can't hold someone just to stabilize them in jail. That's not what jails were intended for. But we're seeing a lot of people that this is the best way to stabilize them right now. And oftentimes they're being held on misdemeanor charges and being held in the jail and deteriorating more. So the Yellow Line project's just bringing more people to the table to help with these folks and assess them. And we're calling it jail diversion, and hopefully during questions and answers, I can clear up anything I might have not been clear on.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any more slides?
It's just a couple more. So
Okay,
we'll
please.
skip this one because I talked about the outreach team, so we'll,
Can I add one piece to this? Right here?
yeah.
So this one right here, this model, we've seen, this is working in New York with the people that do not engage. And what they're doing is they have an outreach team that's going to people before it becomes a 911 call and police are called out to the scene. They have an outreach team of people that are dealing with people in place, whether they're homeless, living on the shore, wherever they're at, trying to get them what they need before it becomes a crisis. And this system here has been very effective with people with substance abuse issues, mental health issues, and do not engage in traditional services. And so that's what the outreach program is that we would like to start here.
And I already talked about the stabilization care, so that would be kind of a good example is the 5 beds that Peace Health is still going to be bringing online hopefully soon. And then this is our estimated timeline. It's a very rough estimate. So we're thinking maybe in a couple years or 3 years of identifying the crisis center, but the other services can be started sooner. So embedding staff at the jail could be done sooner. Having the outreach teams, we could do sooner than the actual crisis center. So again, that would be the comprehensive system where we are engaged with all the systems of care, that there's a lot of collaboration between the jail, the emergency department, the courts, the behavioral health unit, the Whitebird, that all those services are very well coordinated, that it's a very well oiled running machine, that people know these people very well and are able to coordinate services as a unit versus what we have now. They're very isolated systems. And those are our preliminary outcome metrics. So we'll start looking at emergency department visits by individuals, number of arrests, number of bookings, length of stay, number of individuals engaged in services post-jail, number of individuals sent to the state hospital, and length of stay of individuals at the state hospital. These are the metrics we'll start tracking to see how these systems are impacting the data. Okay. And next steps, so the next steps are forming work groups that I think I mentioned this in the kickoff, that are going to be looking at resources, looking at workflow, how all these systems work together. There's a group that's going to be looking at data, how we share that, looking at how we share information as well, and how we bring all these other agencies and other governments that are working together through MOUs and intergovernmental agreements. And hopefully we'll bring back a report in 6 months. And again, we are ensuring that we are coordinating with other divisions who are addressing the TAC recommendations. Questions?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Questions? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. You know, I said this earlier when you weren't here. It's impossible for me to sum up the things that I have to say in the time that I have to say it. So I'll do my best. You know, wow, Mr. Mokrajewski, when you told me that you're considering putting $1 million into the budget to continue with the work that started, perhaps started with the Mental Health Summit, but I think even began as Genesis is even prior to that, it made me particularly excited, but I didn't know how we'd spend $1 million. I didn't know how we would channel that to an outcome that's going to move us toward actually having bricks and mortar and a facility that's going to work. You know, at the time, Dan Buchwald was the captain, and we'd sit around. I'm a fly on the wall. I say we. I got to be a fly on the wall, sitting around the table, hearing you all talk about the benefit of a crisis center, and that nomenclature became embedded in my mind. So I say it. And Mr. Mokrajewski heard me say that word crisis center, those words crisis center, I don't know how many different times. But to see the work the program that you've outlined right here, it just makes my heart beat loud because it is symptomatic of the vast strides that our Health and Human Service Department have made in conjunction with our Public Safety Department, with the Sheriff's Department, to get us to a fruition that's going to keep people, let's see, Pauline, you said these are people we see continue to cycle in our system. They don't just cycle, they cycle downward in our system until ultimately there's a crisis often at the doorstep, which can be resolved either by taking them to jail, taking them to the ER, or an escalated crisis where worse things happen. And we've witnessed that here and abroad. So it's what we're doing right now is absolutely the best way that we can possibly spend our money in terms of addressing the needs that Captain Riley, you see often in the jail, and that we talk about often around the table. I do have a couple of questions. My first one is for you, Mr. Mokrajewski, and there's no answer. This is rhetorical. We put $1 million into this budget cycle for this. What are we going to do for the next budget cycle? We can talk about that later, because this is a start, and this is a beginning, and $1 million doesn't get you bricks and mortar. $1 million gets you the type of research that we're witnessing right here. The second is that, Ms. Gaffney, I'm taking a lot of photos here of these slides. You have seen me take your presentations and co-opt them and make presentations elsewhere. I took your Fuse presentation and took it to Nashville and to high acclaim, which everybody applauded me for your work. Well, I'm hoping
Well
that...
done.
I love that, you know. All I did was take your presentation and make that presentation. So what the slide program that we have right here, I hope that we can have access to that, because that is something that we need to spread throughout the community to help give people the confidence and the faith that we are addressing issues at the root cause. Certainly we're looking for housing, permanent supportive housing, intermediate housing, transitional, transformational housing, all of that. But the root causes are what we're talking about here, the reasons that cause people to fall into homelessness and beyond, into the deep crisis that you witness every single day. You know, once again, I could talk all day about the work that you have done, and I'd be talking about your work, and Ms. Martin, your work, and Captain Riley, your work, in cooperation with, I'll mention David Sanchez, Dr. Sanchez, who I know has been doing a great deal of research, and Dr. Sanchez has visited other crisis centers here in the state. We have 2 in the state. That have been visited. So I hear a lot of information, and once again, it helps me to help ask Mr. Mokrajewski the question that I just asked him, which is really the heart of everything. How do we keep this work going? How do we get to the next step? How do we make this research and the presentation that I will use over and over again, by the way, into the reality of bricks and mortar and service to the people who need it the most and the first? So the question that I have is, we're looking at a model for a crisis center, and you mentioned New York State, far abroad. We do have crisis centers in Marion County, and we do have a crisis center in Jackson County. How do we, how does this differ, or what are the similarities, or is there, what discussion is being had surrounding what's happening in Oregon versus abroad?
We looked at several, and we were looking at communities that are very close or similar to Eugene, because Eugene, while the same, is different and unique. And what we liked about the New York model is the outreach, the group that does the outreach work, because it's a very comprehensive group that even has a psychiatrist that goes out with the other clinicians to where people are. So it's a team that's very comprehensive, and they're daily on the streets talking to people. And what we found out from that model is that eventually those non-engagers did engage, just because the groups were relentless. They were there even when folks were saying, we don't want you here, we don't need your services, they stayed with it. And eventually, even the toughest, the ones that were so paranoid about their system, started to engage. So we like that aspect of the New York. We did look at Marion County. We liked mostly what Clackamas is doing, because I think it closely matches with what the gaps are that we are We have identified, so we were looking at different systems and what makes sense for Eugene. We also talked a lot with the Klamath County that has done very well in addressing their numbers at the state hospital. They started being one of the high-sending counties to where they have almost no one at the state hospital. So we were looking to see what are they doing that we can, kind of try to address or put in place in our community.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive response. And I know that when Commissioner Bozovich speaks, he'll talk about the Public Safety Coordinating Council and the impact of this on the PSCC. I suspect. That's my suspicion.
Wrote that down.
But, you mentioned the New York model of actually going out and finding the people rather than waiting for people to come to us. And you also talked about the fact that in our Human Services Division, we are creating outreach teams and trying to do it as much as possible in coordination. I like that because the work is not dissimilar. But the outreach team that you mentioned in New York and the model that you described sounds a lot like your in-house model that you already have. But this is your in-house model basically being taken into the field, the teams where you have a psychiatrist working with practitioners of other types and caseworkers of other types. So I'm excited because we're not really breaking absolute new ground on this. You're taking things that we have done, that we have talked about, and really bringing them to a fruition. This is a wonderful presentation. Once again, I took probably 12 minutes just now speaking about what really is a long years and years of discussion that have gone into this. So thank you. It's what a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Commissioner Bozovich.
Yeah, and I'll just try and say this is just such an exciting fruition of some long-term work we've been doing around here. I can't remember whether it was 4 or 5 or 6 years ago we passed the Stepping Up initiative. For Lane County, which was a NACO effort, National Association of Counties effort, to divert people with mental illness from our criminal justice system and provide different paths. And we actually, when we passed that, had already been working in that direction quite a bit through our budget and some changes. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that next week when the Public Safety Coordinating Council folks are going to come and talk to us about the public safety plan. One of the things that public safety plan has wrapped into it is our behavioral health system, which wasn't considered part of public safety before, but now it's actually in the plan. And this crisis center is one of the things identified in that plan as a future step and a much needed step. I just had a couple quick questions. We made some pretty significant changes to the jail health system over the years, and one of the things has been putting behavioral health folks right in the jail at this time. And you talked about, having them actually interview at booking or something like that. Can you talk about how the current staff is being utilized there and maybe make me understand a little bit more about the change you're describing?
Absolutely. A lot of the changes we've made in the jail right now due to the population of people that are in there. So we're caring for them from the time they come in to the time they leave, but it doesn't necessarily turn into long-term planning as to prior to them being arrested or after they're released. And so just to take care of the folks that we have in our jail right now, that's why we've continued to add the mental health staff that we have to stabilize them and really run the biggest mental health hospital in the county. That's the changes we've made there. Going back to the outreach team, that's what I've learned from the research that Dr. Sanchez did when we were looking at that. A lot of the folks that are long-term chronic homeless aren't ready to be housed yet. They're not ready to get off substances yet. They feel comfortable living on the street. So when you start with bringing them services to where they're at and try to get them to engage, maybe in a month or two, they'll start to listen and start to think maybe they do want help, they want a different way. Right now, we're using the jail system. If they don't comply, you just arrest them, bring them to jail. That's not working either. It's not working the addiction. It's not solving the problem. These outreach teams have teams of folks that are helping people to realize there is a better way to do things and there is help there. When you continually use the criminal justice system to try to change somebody, addiction and mental health are overriding all of the decisions that they're making, and they're making them due to their addictions. So we have made a lot of changes in the jail, but that's just to deal with the population of people we have in the jail humanely and reasonably to get them safely to court and maneuver the system.
Excellent. Thanks. That's very clear differentiation between what we've done and what we're planning to do. Then my final question, one of the things you have up there is resources and funding. Have we spoken to our two CCOs about participating in this new system? Because it definitely sounds like it might save them some cost, and part of their, and a good portion of this population we're talking about is in the, under the Oregon Health Plan eligible folks, and should be part of that whole coordinated care system that we're trying to establish here in Oregon. So can you, Karen, maybe you can talk a little bit about our coordination with the CCOs?
Happy to, Chair Buck, Commissioner Bozovich. You're absolutely right that not only does it make good financial sense for our coordinated care organizations, but there's also an obligation in CCO 2.0 to really enhance how they process behavioral health and how they address the whole array of behavioral health needs, including crisis, people who are in the state hospital, people who are committed. So we have worked with both Trillium and Pacific Source. Trillium has been part of the Mental Health Summit from the beginning. Now that Pacific Source, beginning this month, is a CCO in the community, they've also been invited to be part of that planning team and are excited about participating in this strategy as well as the homelessness work that we're doing. They absolutely have a community-mindedness, both CCOs, as well as their own business obligations, and see the return on investment that this yields.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Berney.
Did you?
Go ahead.
I was going to be really, really critical of this whole thing, but then Chief Harold came in, so I've adjusted my remarks accordingly. It's okay. He's busy. Just want a statement, and forgive me for making this, but I feel a need to. When county departments are talking to us about a countywide activity and just talking about Eugene. So let me just share, it's Eugene. It's Springfield, and it's about 70 other communities in Lane County. And forgive me, but I think that's important to reiterate given what I heard. So just wanted to say that. I apologize. Also, I wanted to mention that the discussion about jails as a default taking on roles that really were not originally part of the mission or function reminds me of discussions I heard 20 years ago to this day about schools taking on all sorts of functions and dealing with issues young people bring to schools, and it takes away from their original mission. And I think that we're seeing, we are dealing with that phenomenon, and I think the need to develop new systems such as a crisis center system is a response to that, so that some of our primary institutions can focus on their mission. So while I have compliments, everything I'm going to say or questions is in the context of being very supportive. It's very sad to hear, and I have some, not a law enforcement background or experience, but I have experience in jails, and it is so sad but true how, as we take away from their primary mission, we see focuses go from rehabilitation to stabilization to avoiding deterioration. So I'm presuming that a part of this is to get this moving in the right direction again. I think that it behooves us, and I know you're doing it, Karen, but CCOs may have a community mindedness, but they have a profit motive too. And I think that Commissioner Bozovich is correct that this is an alignment of the two, but we have to stay on them to participate financially as much as possible. And my last question relates, this question relates another statement. I noticed you have in there, I was thumbing through the board materials and trying to look at the PowerPoint, but it looks like there is a philosophy that says as many services delivered by peers as possible and appropriate is a good thing. Have you built in there a minimum $15 an hour paying peers to deliver services, or is that something they're just doing?
Chair Buck and Commissioner Berney, absolutely, it's not something that they would just be doing. We haven't built the specific line item level of budget, but what I will tell you is the county has a classification. We employ peers in our behavioral health program right now. So we absolutely would pay a living wage if they were our employees, and there are lots of nonprofits in the community who also employ certified peers. And I don't know off the top of my head what their wage scale is. When we talk about peers, we absolutely talk about employing peers, people with lived experience, and people who have gone through the certification process that the state offers. And in large part, not only because we know that ensures a certain level of quality of services, but it also makes many of their services reimbursable by Trillium and Pacific Source when we have clients we're serving who are Medicaid eligible. So it also is part of the financial model as well to use certified peers.
Thank you very much. That sounds like a yes to me. And I just a point about that, and that is that, in the credentialed society that we live in, very oftentimes those credentials get in the way as it relates to the actual lived or known experience. So I'm a big fan, for what it's worth, of as much, and it also saves money, but as much paid peer-delivered services, training of people who've had that experience. Obviously, they're the best to connect. And I presume that, or I hope, as many peers can be those community coordinators that I saw up there as possible as you're developing this. Last question. I think there was a time frame that said 36 months we're going to have a building. Could you go back to that slide? Because I might be incorrect.
And
What question? I'm sorry. Did you want to?
no, finish your question. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Yes, ma'am. No, I'm just kidding. Don't worry about it. I interrupt all the time. Can we accelerate that time frame?
Chair Buck, Commissioner Berney, I thought you might be wondering if there wasn't some way we could push that. And I am hopeful, and I also believe in not overpromising, and so I wanted to be clear in terms of setting expectations that there are a lot of pieces that need to come together in terms of not only the funding for such a place, but siting it is sometimes a challenging issue, as you know, and then making sure we have solid programming. So my hope is that we would deliver prior to the 36-month mark, but I also wanted to set a reasonable expectation about the work that needs to happen in order for that to materialize.
Can I continue just a bit? So I totally get under promise and over deliver, but since you're not making any commitments here, what might be the speediest scenario we might see that occur?
Chair Buck, Commissioner Berney, I think a lot depends on siting, frankly, and I think siting of finding the right location and then pulling together the operational funding for that piece. And I would imagine that in the next 3 to 4 months, we would have a better sense of that. Each of those small teams that Pauline talked about are just now convening to start to do that resource development work. We, for instance, are waiting for the state to release a grant. We've been waiting for a while now. The Impacts Grant, which initially was known as Behavioral Health Justice Reinvestment, which is a place where we think there will be ongoing sustainable resources from the state to support the strategies we're talking about here in the Crisis Center. So we're anticipating in the next couple months that RFP will be out. So as we are able to get some of those financial commitments, then I think that we'll be in a better position to move forward. We want to make sure clearly when we open the doors that we have a solid sustainability plan moving forward.
Can I just, sorry. I just want to add to that I think this is a really important point, not only for this issue, but if you look at everyone wants these projects and facilities to move forward quicker than they are. But what, I'll just take the fairgrounds issue that you had public comment on and we're going to talk about later today. That site has been talked about for exactly what is being proposed for several years. And now that it's a decision is before the board, the process is moving too fast. We need to slow down. There needs to be more engagement, even though it's been evaluated and discussed for years. So when we talk, right now we're in the theoretical stage, and I will just suggest the two most important points, Karen mentioned this, are funding, and as important and even more so once funding is identified, because we're seeing funding become available from the state, and we need to bring our private sector partners to the table, such as Peace Health and the CCOs, because they benefit from this as much as anyone, is the political will. Is engagement of the community and the political will, because once we start talking about specific sites, and we're going to see this, we talk about a low barrier shelter and navigation center, you see criticism in the daily paper about why isn't this moving fast enough? Well, once we start talking about specific sites, then there's resistance. So we certainly, we've had the same conversation privately. Can we do it faster than 36 months? Everyone wants this in yesterday because the need is there right now. I would suggest, again, I think funding will be something that, given the discussion at the legislature about the potential of a $40 million package, we want to be ready to go and achieve that funding and bring our private sector partners. It really becomes engaging the community and the political will to site these facilities that I think we've seen a big challenge. What we heard in Portland, we toured the navigation center there. Multnomah County Director of the Joint Office on Homelessness said, don't think that there's a perfect location for any of these things. Navigation centers, shelters, resource centers, behavioral crisis centers. You need to identify the location that can have the biggest impact on the community, work with the community, and move forward. Because there's obviously a lot of disagreement. And so anyways, thank you. I just wanted to offer that's really where the rubber meets the road is I think the political will to get behind the siting.
I hope that Mr. Mokrahysky's remarks are not charged to my time. Thank you. I want you to know that behind the scenes, and two people know this, I'm working to try and help you with siting in a site that actually would ameliorate many of the concerns that Mr. Mokrahysky mentioned. Thank you. Thank you. This is great. Thank you for the time.
Chair Buck, I hope you have a lot to say, but may I say one thing?
Please.
First on Commissioner Bernie's time?
Story of my life. By the way, before you do that, my living room is also a crisis center, so I'm familiar with the concept. I'm sorry, Pat.
And just to tag along with what Commissioner Bernie just said, we are a full community here. And I was talking to officials from Springfield just yesterday about not just their desire, but their excitement to move forward with siting, not just housing, but services of this type in the community. So the officials there, both staff and elected officials, are excited about exactly what you say, Commissioner Bernie.
And if I may, because Commissioner Farr has a very close relationship with he truly does. I also was speaking to them, and they reiterated that to me, too. Thank you, sir. Sorry.
All right. Well, part of the benefit of being chair is letting everybody else speak, because I don't have much of a voice.
You get the last word.
And Commissioner Bernie's last question was actually the one that I was going to ask as well. And clearly everybody has thought that through already. I'm so impressed with what H&HS is doing throughout this last year as commissioner. There's been a lot going on. You've got, the Commons, the methadone clinic, the clinic in Cottage Grove you're still working on. You've got a crisis center that you're trying to implement as well. I mean, this is big, meaty, chewy stuff that you're putting in the ground. And I just think you're doing a fantastic job. I know that the community is kind of made it that they're counting on you to do this, and you're really stepping up. And I want to give my appreciation to all that hard work. It's not easy, but a lot of good stuff is coming to fruition. So thank you.
Chair Buck, I thank you so much for that acknowledgement. We have a great staff that's helping move all of that. And I also just wanted to take a moment to really acknowledge the Sheriff's Office. In listening to Captain Riley talk about his perspective on this population and the jail, I could not ask for a better partner in moving this work forward and really being able to see what the needs are and being able to roll up their sleeves and dive in to help us fix it. It's been a tremendous partnership with the Sheriff's Office.
Excellent. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you. I think just the way that we in Lane County integrate the different departments to be so coordinated and be able to speak with each other and have such good relationships, this is the kind of good stuff that comes out of that. So thank you for being there. Any other comments or questions for our guests?
Would be a song.
Go forth and do good work.
Thank you.
Yes, go forth and do good work.
And multiply.
All right, we'll move to item 7, County Council. I don't see any announcements unless there's announcements. We'll move. We do have an exec session after this particular item, and it will move upstairs to the small conference room for that. Expected to be about 45 minutes, and so we'll end out the morning there. So we'll move to item 7B, Order 20-01-28-07, in the matter of adopting findings and approving exemption of the Lane Event Center chiller replacement project from the competitive bidding requirement of ORS 279C as an alternative project delivery pilot project pursuant to ORS 279C.355. That's a mouthful. Mr. Cheney.
Yes, hi. This was submitted as were there questions on this, or would you, excuse me, Chair Buck, Commissioners, were there specific questions that the commissioners had, or would you like an outline of this? What would be your preference?
Outline or short summary would be great.
Okay, and I should say then, Chair Buck, Clay Stillwell, our purchasing manager, would be here, but for the fact that he had a conflicting meeting already, and I said I thought I could probably handle this. Briefly, Oregon law requires that public improvements, that is, construction or alterations of infrastructure like buildings, roads, and bridges, must be constructed by low bid. It's a little ironic in that public agencies hire architects and engineers without consideration of fee and then have them draw plans and then award the contracts based exclusively on price. But that's the way the system is set up. And that's the way it works unless the local contracting board grants an exemption. And the exemptions for those are fairly narrow. They're listed in item 3A of the memo, and those are the construction manager, general contractor, design build, or energy savings performance contracting. And what those are is they're different methods of selecting based on both price and qualifications for particular kinds of projects that would be where there's savings to be anticipated through hiring them that way rather than having them bid otherwise, prepared and bid otherwise. So with that, if the board approves this exemption, then what the county would do with this particular project, which I'll discuss in a moment, is we would advertise it. We would come back to the board for authority to make an award because time is a big factor on this. We would receive proposals, make a selection based on that, and award a contract. This contract is for replacement of the chiller unit at the event center, and that's the big cooling unit that cools the big building. We learned late last year that that unit is very close to the end of its service life. It's 24 years old, I believe, with a service life of 16 to 20 years. And the people who did the maintenance gave us a recommendation on that. That came in December. given that the biggest load on it is in the summer and also the biggest load on the facility is in the summer, what would be the most optimal thing is to have that replaced before June. And if we were to use the conventional method, we would have to advertise, hire an engineer, get an engineer to draw plans, advertise that, send it out to bid, and we know that from that timeline, even the minimal timeline, it won't be able to happen within that time frame. So if we use this method, this project itself lends itself to design build because the scope is pretty limited. There's a big piece of equipment, and the existing one needs to be taken apart and removed, a new one purchased, installed, and some piping modifications. Depending on the cost of piping modifications, there may be some additional modifications that we'd have done. So it's a pretty defined scope of work, not a lot of variables. I have personally talked to the engineer who's familiar with this unit from a local engineering firm and to the presidents of the two largest local mechanical contracting firms, and they confirm that if this were the private sector, this would be done as a design build. What's more, they said they would both be interested in this project on this basis in responding to it. Plus, the contractor that does the maintenance on our units has already said that they would give us a proposal for doing it on this basis. So with that, I recommended this be done as a design-build project. The county has done construction projects using the other two alternate contracting methods, but has never used the design-build method in this way. And so we proposed this. I wrote this recommendation. We advertised that we were considering making this recommendation in the Daily Journal of Commerce, as we're required to, and we gave a 2-week period for receiving any public comments or and held a public hearing yesterday, or an opportunity for people to come and present comments, and we didn't receive any comments one way or the other on it. So that's what's before you, is whether to grant this exemption for this particular project. The cost here, we're talking probably between $400,000 and $700,000, depending on whether it's just replacing the minimal chiller or whether the proposal, we have two alternate proposals that would include replacing additional piping and preparing to increase the size by adding another unit later down the road. So with that, that's a not too brief outline of the background of this.
Any discussion? Commissioner Farr?
I'm excited to hear what discussion may come from that side of the dais, but I wish that Karen Ramos were here to hear the discussion of the capital improvement to the facility, because that's one thing that she and I talked about over the weekend, is the county's obligation to maintain the existing facilities at the fairgrounds, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. So thank you for this presentation.
Anybody else? Commissioner Burney?
Just questions. So this is essentially February. I presume the recommendation to replace occurred last summer?
I heard about it in December. I think that's when we got the recommendation.
Really? Because I would imagine the last work on it, maintenance would have been, I'm not against this at all. I'm just I'm curious what the traditional time frame would have been and whether we really didn't have enough time. Now we don't. I understand that.
I'm not familiar with the background. What I do know is that we got the maintenance contractor, that the train company out of Portland, made this analysis, gave this recommendation, and we received that in December.
Gotcha. And forgive me, I know a little, but not nearly as much as you do. So, Train, among other things, is an EPC, right? I mean, they'll do it, energy performance contracting. No, that's totally okay. How much energy is this anticipated to save? Do we know that? And do we know dollar-wise what? Because obviously, right, I mean, the energy efficiency of the chillers and the equipment of today far exceeds the specs of 20 years ago, 24. So I'm just curious whether this even fits within that rubric of desired approaches?
Commissioner Bernie, so you're thinking of like the energy savings performance contracting
That's what
kind
you
of
call
model?
it in here, but I'm calling it the same. Yes, sir.
I think this is, from my experience with that, and I've been involved with one of those projects for the county, and then I was involved in one as a contractor, so I have only enough knowledge to be dangerous, which is where I like to be. And with that, this is one particular unit that is at risk of failing, and this analysis the scope isn't to look at the entire building, and I think that would be a much bigger project. I think my sense is that this unit would be a modern unit. It would be a carrier or a train type unit, but I think this doesn't include that scope of analysis, and I don't think replacing this probably precludes that kind of analysis going down the road.
Gotcha. So the only other comments are, I agree with Commissioner Farr. I hope the Fairgrounds is listening, because this is something we take very seriously as we move forward. And I'm guessing there will be a major retrofit at some point consistent, if that we looked at that master plan. And energy performance contracting, energy service, I've done a lot of those myself, enough to be dangerous. And it's a great way to go if the project fits it. I really appreciate what's being said about timeliness. We did one project where we were replacing the chillers at the Hilton Los Angeles, and they waited until the last possible moment to replace, and their chiller went out before we replaced it. Right? So this will save the county so much money if we decide to keep waiting and waiting and waiting. So I, for one, am in complete support of what you're proposing.
Any other comments, questions? All right. Well, I just wanted to add that I had the same question as to the timing of it coming forward. It seems like something this big, when you're looking at facilities, perhaps we would have known a little earlier that it needed to be replaced so we could go through the public process that we're normally required to do. I would like to be able to do that on future items, and instead of waiting till we know summer's coming. Yes.
Yeah, I will say, if I may, I know that the county is doing a facility assessment. That's one of the things that in the budget cuts of years ago was one of those things that had not been done, but I think that there is currently a facility assessment. They're going through and analyzing units, ages, that sort of thing, so that we can get out of the mode of being, I mean, I'm not involved in that particular process at all, but I know that that's ongoing with the intention of getting out ahead of these. I think this is probably, it just was an old unit that we were hoping would keep lasting until we had that plan, and now it just looks like it's way more at risk than was anticipated, and that'll still happen.
Yep.
Understood. Thank you. Well, I would entertain a motion to approve item 7B, order number 20-01-28-07 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Bernie, second by Commissioner Bozovich. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion passes with Sorensen excused. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. So we'll move into executive session at this point. I'll read us in, and then we will recess up to the small conference room in about 5 minutes. Let's say 11:55. So we'll move into executive session for Tuesday, January 28, 2020. The Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions and to consult with county council regarding the rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-660 subsection 2, subsection E and H, which will allow the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in an executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public sessions should the need arise, and we will be coming back out into public session at a minimum at 1:30 today here in Harris Hall. We are recessed